The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel is written to us by John. The sisters of Lazarus sent word to Jesus, and they said, "Master, the one you love is ill." When Jesus heard this, he said, "This illness is not to end in death, but it is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, "Now let us go back to Judea." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary sat at home. And Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise." Martha said, "Oh, I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day." And Jesus said, "But I am the resurrection. I am the life. And whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is forever coming into the world." And Jesus became upset and deeply troubled, and he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said, "Sir, come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." And some of them said, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have done something so that this man would not have died?" Jesus, perturbed again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay across it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the dead man's sister, said to him, "Lord, by now he will stink. He has been dead for 4 days." And Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus raised his eyes, and he said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd here I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was still wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Untie him and let him go free." Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what he had done began to believe in him. This is the gospel of the Lord. Just 2 very short points, because we get to bless our young candidates after the homily. Notice that twice in this gospel, I read the short version if you were following along. It's one of the longer gospel accounts of the year. But on 2 different times they say, "This would not have happened if you had been here." And yet, it's very clear Jesus deliberately delays. He lets it happen. He allows it to happen. And he says, in fact, this has to be for the glory of God to be shown. So first of all, you could think, well, he's not very sympathetic for his friends, but he's always looking at a much bigger picture. And he seems to be saying, and I think he is saying, that sometimes you have to let death happen. And you'll only get the message afterwards. Now that's almost impossible for us common sense humans to believe. We think our job is to stop all death. And that's the best answer. Jesus says, no, sometimes you have to allow it. And that will teach you, transform you in a much bigger way. As some of you know, I had to put down my 15-year-old dog this week. And I went through pretty much 2 days of sobbing and even heaving with tears for this faithful friend. Any of you who have had a dog for any length of time, you know, I see all the heads nodding all over the church. You know what it's like. It's hell. They really are our best friend, aren't they? I've been saying, if obedience, unconditional love, and loyalty are going to get you into heaven, there's going to be a lot more dogs in heaven than people. But by the grace of God, I woke up today completely okay. And I didn't understand it myself. And then I realized that the tears I was shedding were not just tears for her loss, but you know, the same tears that can be the tears of sadness were the tears of immense happiness for the joy she gave me for 15 years. They're the same tears. And I don't think I would have known that unless I allowed it to happen. And you have to each apply this to your own situation. It was hell to have to put her down. And yet already, by her death, I can feel myself in a different place. I don't even know precisely how to describe it. But I know somehow she got me there. Any of you who've walked with a death in faith, you know the truth of what I'm saying. There's some things you can only know by dying. The other point I want to make is at the very end, where he says, well, first he has to tell them to roll the stone away. The stone is certainly a symbol of our disbelief, our hard-heartedness, that God cannot turn our death into resurrection. Who of us believes that? It's not logical. You only know it after the fact. But then when they finally get the courage to move away the stone, his final words are, untie him and let him go free. It seems that we are all a part of this freeing of one another. We have the power to keep one another trapped in our small and silly deaths. And we also have the power to cooperate with resurrection, to cooperate with hope, to cooperate with belief. None of us can believe alone. We need people around us who are positive, who are hopeful, even in the midst of the terrible politics this country is involved in, even in the midst of the horrible horrors happening all over the earth. Death seems all around us, and yet somehow it has to be the Holy Spirit within us that allows people like you, and sometimes even people like me, to still believe that God is the one who turns death into resurrection. In fact, that's God's job description. That's about all that God does. God turns death into resurrection. When you can believe that, when you can live that, on that day you begin to be a Christian.